So welcome, Dr. Ron Carlee, and thank you for participating in this session of Teaching Fair. We'll be talking about your experiences and insights from teaching difficult and sometimes controversial topics. So to get us started, can you offer a little background or context about the classes you teach and how difficult or controversial topics are part of your classes?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for letting me be part of this conversation. And thank you for your work in trying to share best practices across the academy, something we all benefit from. My classroom approach on difficult topics is informed by my prior professional work as a city manager. In that role, we dealt with difficult topics all the time. And my role, along with that of the elected officials, was to build community that was welcoming to everyone based on dialogue and consensus building. And so in the classroom, I've always tried to bring those same values and many of the same difficult topics for the students to explore together as a connection to the real world. And so I've included the topics in probably everything that I've ever taught, but this became more intense in 2018 when I developed an elective on the history of race in U.S. policy. Essentially, it was a course on institutional racism. And there just seemed to be a lot of compelling reasons based on what was going on in the U.S. at that time to take the risk and offer that course. In 2021, I developed an expanded course on diversity, equity, and inclusion that examines public management and public policy issues across seven different populations: women, African Americans, Indigenous people, Asian, Hispanic immigrants, people with disabilities, and the LGBTQ community. This is now a core course in the MPA program. It's been taught every semester since 2021. So, as you can imagine, every hot topic that you can think about across these different populations and policy areas comes up in the course. And there is now a full attack on the topic by the White House that describes the content as inherently divisive, if not un-American. So, interestingly enough, by making anti-DEI so prominent in the administration, paradoxically, the president himself has made the compelling case why it needs to be studied as a part of public administration and public policy as a part of an MPA program. And I don't think we can shy away from having those discussions, especially when it's so front and center across governance today.
Thank you for that introduction and a little bit of background and context. I definitely agree that this is kind of a topic that we cannot shy away from, but that's part of the conversation we're going to have today is it's not something that is easy to teach or easy to talk about. So let's jump right in. Before we talk about the nitty-gritty of the classroom conversation, can you talk about your basic approach to setting the tone and framing the discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So many years ago, I was doing professional training with a colleague at the International City County Management Association named Felissa Logan. And Felissa was very much a people person. I'm pretty much a get things done person. And as would do training together, she always insisted that we begin with connection before content. And that was not natural for me. For me, is getting in there and let's get going. Let's learn what we got to learn and get on with stuff. But she was relentless, and as I watched over the years, she's had a lasting impression on me. I make a conscious effort to begin with connection in all of my classes and in other work that I do as well. So in the classroom, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, I begin every semester by having the students post a video bio. And what that does by being video, it makes the other person real. And they can share as little or as much as they want to. I want them to share what they're comfortable with, and whatever they share, things like where you're from, even help make people not just a list of names in a course, but real people. And I think that human to human connection is something that is critical for us to start with. and to reinforce throughout a course and throughout our other work that we do as well. The second thing I think is really important is as the instructor is being clear about what the expectations are in the class. As you know well, many professors and perhaps even yourself encourage debate. Academia is supposed to be a place where we can come and debate ideas and have back and forth. And so that's good and constructive, learning how to develop a persuasive argument and presenting it. All of that is really, it's excellent stuff. It is not what I do, and it is not what I do in the class. So in my classes, in particular, these that are around race and around diversity, I'm looking not for debate, I'm looking for dialogue. And I draw on the work of Mary Frances Winters and others to try to create not this zero sum kind of win lose in an argument, but to explore, why do I think the way that I do? And why do other people think the way that they do? And to develop a dialogue that promotes understanding rather than winning.
So I really appreciate that distinction between debate and dialogue, because not a debate structure or approach isn't always appropriate for every single class, because there are topics like this where you don't want to necessarily promote winners or losers in kind of that debate structure. So I appreciate very much um, that distinction that you're making. For many people, when we talk about race, gender, and other topics, that can be emotional and intense and can lead to reluctance to have conversations around these issues, or make it challenging for some students to participate in conversations. So, how do we as teachers co create a safe learning environment with and for our students to have these conversations and discussion?
Well, you're right. We are very reluctant to have these discussions because they are sensitive, and so mostly we don't have them. And I will argue that we've not made more progress than we have because we haven't been willing to talk about the issues that we need to talk about. And so creating a space where we can do it is really critical. And the starting point there is what I describe as having a conversation about the conversation. You know, what is the mindset that we're going to bring in to the topics that we're going to be talking about? Now, I've already said around dialogue as opposed to debate, but what are some of the other tools and what are the values that we want to operationalize in having that dialogue? One of the most compelling tools that I've ever seen is one called Yes and. We'll probably talk about that a little bit. We'll go ahead and talk about that now because it's so incredibly powerful. How many times have we been engaged in a conversation, especially maybe just sitting around a conference room, sharing ideas, and you say something, and the next person says, "I agree with you, but." You've heard that how many times? You have said that how many times? It is built into the way that we have conversation. Here's the problem though. When we say but, it becomes a verbal backspace key and deletes everything we said before it. So I agree with you, but no, I really don't agree with you. And I'm about to tell you why you're wrong. You're doing great work, but all right, I'm about to find out how I'm not doing great work. And so a tool from improvisational theater is called Yes and. And I discovered this by an improv group in Chicago that was teaching leadership skills to library directors. And it's really very simple. There's some exercises that you can do that are fun, but the underlying concept is when you're about to say but, just catch yourself and say yes and. I agree with you, and here's my idea. Rather than negating what you've said, it's affirming what you said. And I'm telling you, not that I necessarily agree with you, but that I heard you. And I find in these conversations where people's emotions can run fairly high, that yes and is a compelling tool to help tone down emotions and help people feel heard. Now, it's also a tool that's used a lot in ideation and entrepreneurial work. You'll find it all over the place. I find it really valuable in this discussion as well.
So if I could add, I was introduced to the yes and by my colleague Jennifer Alonso, who was a theater professor here at ODU. And it was introduced in the context of climate science and climate change conversations. So very, very similar context as well. So it is something that I try to be conscious about once that concept was introduced to me.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Going back to your question though about people having a difficult time talking about these topics, it is very true, and it's true for a lot of reasons. Most of all, we feel we don't like discomfort. As humans, we don't like discomfort to start with. We mostly don't want to offend other people. We're afraid that we'll be seen as ignorant because we don't fully understand the topic, or we'll say something wrong and that we'll be judged. And it just, it's all these kinds of fears that are developed that makes it really hard for us. And for most of us, at the end of the day, we're pretty vulnerable. And if we can acknowledge that with one another and discuss what our concerns are, then I think we have an opportunity to engage in the discussion where we acknowledge we will likely make mistakes, and those mistakes can be learning opportunities as opposed to areas of judgment. I'm really been taken by the work of Dolly Chug, her book, The Person You Mean to Be. Uh, it's really a compelling read. It was introduced to me by diversity, equity, inclusion officer for a city, and she talks about how our self-image is threatened in some of these conversations where we may say something that may be hurtful or unintended or problematic. And what she says is we're focused on being good people. And if we do something that is perceived as not being good, that undermines our self-image, and we end up being defensive or even withdrawn. And she promotes this idea of our trying to be not good people, but goodish people, recognizing that we have flaws and changing from what she calls a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, so that as I encounter new things, as I stumble along this journey, as I make mistakes along the way, that I have the opportunity to grow and do better the next time. I'll just tell you one quick story, because part of what in this discussion, what's so important is not making assumptions about other people, which is really hard to do because the way we see the world is the way we think the world is, and so we will project our perspectives on to other people. And I remember in an ethics class a while back, I had one of the first really intense conversations about race and introduced it doing a lot of things that we've talked about already today, and acknowledging the difficulty of it. And then we had a really, really fruitful conversation. It was one of the best conversations I've ever had in a class. It was the right size, and people were engaged, and they were being honest and open. It was really incredible. And so I was congratulating them at the end of the conversation. And I said, we thought this was going to be really hard. It really wasn't that hard, was it? And one of my African American students said, actually, it was. Actually, it was. And that was probably one of the most impactful statements that has ever been made to me in a class. And it was only 3 words, but it was a stark reminder to me that what may be uncomfortable for me may not be uncomfortable for someone else, and what is comfortable for me may be very uncomfortable for someone else. We can't make assumptions about what other people feel and experience.
So you talk about, trying to create this safe space for students to support their learning and growth. And you've used the example of the yes and as one way to maybe facilitate that conversation and kind of build upon rather than taking away from. What other strategies? How else can we do that in the classroom?
So building on the yes and, what we do also do at the beginning of the course is develop a set of guides or norms that we can then operationalize our intent of being respectful and open with other people. One of the and there are about six of them that I use pretty regularly and have dialogue with the students about them. So the one I usually begin with is from Stephen Covey. I know that goes back into ancient times, but his idea of seeking first to understand and then to be understood, which sort of plays on what I was saying just a few moments ago. And that also shifts us more into dialogue than debate. If I'm focused on getting you to understand me, I'm not focused on understanding you. And so, how do I make that shift and listen with intent? Another one, and I don't, I picked this one up from Dr. Valika Gatling at ODU. I'm not sure where Dr. Gatling got it, but she said it a lot, and it's become ingrained in me, sort of like connection before content from Felissa. This one is curiosity over judgment. As human beings, we have a natural tendency to judge, especially when we encounter something that conflicts with our view, with our perspective. And the idea here is to recognize when we're judging and just stop and think about it and be curious about it. Okay, so why is that the way it is? Why is that person the way they are? And that one, it's easy to remember, and I think it's extraordinarily powerful. Using I statements rather than, Dr. Yusuf, you're such a racist. Well, that's a debatable statement, and that's not about dialogue. That's me just calling you a label. If you did something though that I felt was racist, and I were to say, Dr. Yusuf, that felt racist to me, that's not a debatable statement. Those are my feelings. I'm not accusing you of being racist. I'm telling you how I felt. And can we now have a conversation about that, as opposed to accusing you of something that may be completely different than what you are? Probably one of the most powerful one, and this comes through in several videos that I use throughout the course, is the value in just pausing. When something's happening, and especially if you feel it emotionally, and you know what that feeling, everybody knows what that feeling's like, right? You know when you start getting emotional, you know when you have a negative reaction, we all do. And we feel it differently. We feel it. When we feel it, it's a good opportunity to pause and reflect. Why am I feeling that? Where is that coming from? How is this affecting me? And then to be thoughtful in what we say and how we phrase it. Uh, One that several people have shared with me over the years that I've grown to really fond of, and that is showing grace and kindness. I would say if there is anything there is definitely not an oversupply of in this world right now, is grace and kindness. And can we begin that right here with one another? Giving each other a break. When somebody does something that you feel is hurtful or inappropriate, give them some grace and provide an opportunity for some discussion around it, which gets to the last one, and perhaps it's probably one of the hardest, and that's developing a sense of empathy. I have a number of videos and tools that I use in class, one of which is really compelling, talking about this great image. To walk in someone else's shoes, you first have to take your shoes off. And taking our own shoes off is a really, really hard thing to do. And then putting on the perspective of another person. When we can do that, however, it does open ourselves up to, I think, fairly significant individual growth.
So a lot of what we've talked about are things that I think are easy to implement, are fairly easy to think about how we might put them in place in an in-person classroom. But you also teach classes online. And how does that online environment potentially change the dialogue and the conversation?
Yeah, and all of uh, all of what we've been discussing today is pretty much from my online asynchronous syllabus Canvas material that we share together and becomes the first part of every class. So we spend a fairly substantial amount of time trying to get to know each other and to create an empathy and connection. So like the values I was just talking about, the norms a few minutes ago, uh, I have that content on Canvas. I then have the students discuss it. I have them talk about how they react to those values, ask them what to share what their core values are, ask them what behaviors are important to them in a conversation to ensure that they feel respected and heard, and ask them, is there something missing here? Is there something else that should be added? That applied learning where they come back and share their perspectives makes all of the content real. And the students learn from one another's words, even though this is a written discussion board that we're doing this in, the humanity of the individual students comes out and they can see where they have shared values and where they have connections. And as such, it becomes self-policing in the dialogues that take place over the course of the semester. I can only remember one discussion several years ago where a person posted something that was inappropriate and out of context with the dialogue over debate philosophy in the class. And when I first saw it, I didn't have the ability to stop what I was doing and just deal with it. I had to come back to it. And interestingly, when I went back to it, it was gone. In all of my discussions, students have the ability to edit and delete their own post. It was gone. And so I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if it was peer pressure or it may have been the person reviewing what other students were saying and how they were saying it, but it was completely self-correcting. And I think that can only occur by having the front end discussions about expectations and getting to know each other as human beings and trying to respect each other the way that each of us wants to be respected ourselves.
So it's really that front end framing conversation at the beginning of class that I think really sets the tone and kind of allows for that conversation to sustain over the course of the semester. Are there times where you've had to kind of pull the group back and kind of reinforce that conversation or just remind, or does that work pretty well at the beginning of the class session?
Yeah, it's actually worked extremely well. Uh, Now, of course, as you said, the dynamic's different in person than on campus. I would say in the in-person classes, I don't have to I've not had to worry much about students really engaging in respectful way. Again, I can only think of one instance where a student did engage in some inappropriate behavior, which is more of a blaming, shaming kind of thing. And I intervened between the two people who were involved, and we had a good. I think we had a good discussion about it. What I find that is more likely to occur, especially in the in-person classes, is is people getting emotional, not at one another, but at the policies and events themselves. Uh, and and that's the part of these courses that are really hard. Things have happened over the years that should not have happened. And there's much in there that we've never studied. I didn't study. In fact, almost everything I teach, I did not get exposed to across any of my 3 degrees, in no content that I ever had. And so we're trying to bring content that, by and large, people have not been exposed to, and sometimes it's a little hard. It's a little harsh. Uh, and that's across the board in every population that we deal with. And we had some really emotion in one of my recent classes around the history of people with mental illness and disabilities. and the way we would institutionalize people in asylums and the conditions under which people lived. Um, and ultimately, I think that as we look objectively at our past and we look at the trend, we can see a trend, we can see areas of progress. Sometimes it's a step forward and two step backwards, but overall, I think that what it shows is that in public policy in this country, uh, we've tried to be better people. We've tried to learn and to advance respect across our populations. And we've got to have a commitment to continue that journey because we're not there. And most likely we never will be there, either as individuals on our journey to be goodish people and to reflect our values in the way we treat other people, and likewise as a country in our public policies and those ideals to which we strive around liberty and justice for everyone. We're not there. We're all works in progress individually and collectively.
But I think part of the reason why these are such difficult conversations and difficult topics to talk about is because they resonate so strongly with issues that are out there in the fabric of society. And each individual, regardless of where you're coming from, is impacted by it in some shape or form. And so I think that's a really important recognition. We're almost at the end of our time. So are there any other points that you want to share to wrap us up?
Yeah, the one last thought that just occurred to me, that I think is also important in this class is bringing in as many voices as possible. And to bring in the debates, to bring in the some of the more extreme positions, and to see the full range of what is out there, not filtered through me, but for people to hear directly or read directly from the authors of that, uh, so that people can make judgments on their own. And then ultimately, I will say the most powerful thing about this course is the peer learning itself. We have such a diverse student body with such rich lived experiences of so many different kinds. Their ability to share their perspectives with one another is extraordinarily powerful. And creating the environment where they can do that is one of the richest things I think that we can offer them, which is each other for themselves.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carlee, for all of that, all of those insights, and for sharing your experiences and what you've learned yourself from engaging with students in the classroom. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your participating in the teaching fair.
Thank you.